Welcome again to the MAGNiTT client webinar on advanced analytics. The topic is unlocking advanced analytics. And today, myself and I and Amir, our co-host as well, will tackle a few topics in the space of the advanced analytics platform on MAGNiTT. We will go through a few use cases, and at the end, we'll also have a Q&A session. Just to introduce ourselves and to introduce MAGNiTT, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with MAGNiTT as you are MAGNiTT clients, but we just want to recap what what we are all about. So I'm going to just kind of recap that. So just to introduce myself, Habib, I'm the account manager. Our title is Senior Account Executive at MAGNiTT. I'm joined by my co-host Amir, the client success representative from the account management team. We deal with these use cases on a daily basis, so we thought it would be a great idea to highlight them to all of our client base and to also engage with our client community and also get their feedback and questions on this this webinar that we are about to go through and tackle the different functionalities and use cases of the advanced analytics feature. A quick note on MAGNiTT. MAGNiTT is a venture capital data platform. We track funding of startups in Pakistan, Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. Currently, we're at 25,000 and more startups, more than 7,500 investors, and more than 10,500 funding rounds. I think most of you already know this, but just to recap this for our audience. On advanced analytics, so when data is great, obviously data is great, but there is a way to visualize it and to hopefully tell a story with this data, to analyze it. And specifically when we are talking about venture capital data, and this is how we produced our reports, this is how we produce our analyses that we give to our clients as part of them being on the MAGNiTT platform. And as part of their MAGNiTT subscription, some clients have access to our advanced analytics tool. But the idea that the question that many people have been asking us when they first see the tool is, how does it work? Where does the data come from? And how often is the data updated? Now, the MAGNiTT platform obviously has three categories. The first being directories. This is where you search for the startups, for your investors, and for your funding rounds. The reports is where you download the reports that we publish, both free and client exclusive. And the last section is analytics, which is where the advanced analytics tool resides. And this is what we will be tackling today. Now, the idea when we came up with this tool was that we wanted to visualize this funding data that we've been collecting and verifying over the years in order to visualize it and to have another tool that would be complementary to the reports from the side of visualizing that data using filters and using views that are not necessarily, went into that detail through the reports themselves. Now, it is basically, it's updated on around every 4 hours. This is taken from the verified funding rounds on our platform, the verified funding rounds being verified by our data team. And they do this by verifying it using public sources, this funding information. Also using information that we get from our investor partners and clients, as well as also from the startups themselves, but in that case, it will also be verified with the investors and co-investors. So what is shown in the advanced analytics tool is verified information when it comes to the funding information that we're about to tackle right now. For example, benchmarking the funded startups and seeing, for example, exits. This is all verified information. But when it goes into things such as estimated deployed capital and such things such as that, this is an estimate. Again, so this is done to the best of our ability using the information that we've collected from the estimated ticket sizes of every funding round that an investor has participated in. And we'll get into that in detail in a second. So today we'll be tackling 3 different use cases. I'm going to be switching in a second to the platform view where you'll be able to actually see what the tool looks like if you haven't seen it before. Also, again, I want to mention that this tool is constantly being updated with new charts and new views and filters, which means that if you will watch this in a month or 2, it might not be the same. It might be updated with more and more views or have improved functionality. but this is how it is for now. This is, I think, the fourth iteration of the tool. So the three cases I wanted to tackle today is the first one being benchmarking funded startups by country, industry, and region. We often get this question a lot from our clients, for example, in the consulting, the research fields, and also from the government clients as well, who want to understand and to benchmark, for example, how are these startup industries doing in their countries versus others in the region? Maybe to also help with policy making, with research. Maybe there's an investor who wants to understand the landscape in a certain country or a region before entering that market or region. There's a lot of different use cases, but we just want to tackle this through the lens of the advanced analytics. So I'm just going to now go to the platform where I will take a look at the startup analysis section. So this is accessed by going to analytics and then going to the startup analysis section. The startup analysis section offers us two views. It offers us the funded startup by day trades, which we are not going to be tackling right now. We want to focus on right now is to understand, for example, if I want to see how many funded startups there are across the different regions that we track. We can look at this by region. The regions that we track, as you know, are the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, Turkey, North Africa, and Pakistan. We can also look at this by country, being all the countries that we track. So I'm just going to let this load for a second. Just a little glitch there. So as we can see, in terms of what we're tracking as funded startups, we have the most funded startups in Turkey, followed by the UAE, Egypt, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. We can, again, zoom in a bit more with this tool. This tool lets us actually look at the data through different lenses in a way where we can, let's say, we want to look at funded startups that are only part, for example, of the fintech industry across the countries that we monitored. And with that, the graph is updated. So now we can see that, for example, Nigeria is leading in the number of funded fintech startups that we've been tracking on our platform, followed by the UAE, South Africa, and Turkey. There's a lot of ways in which we can actually go and look at this data. If we're talking about funding, we're going to be tackling that in a few minutes when we look at the geographical and industry benchmarking. Going back to this, we can even be a bit more specific. Let's say how many funded startups are there that are at their Series A stage and pre-Series A, for example. We can use the stage filter here to actually go in and update the chart to zoom in on that information. So we're talking about the number, the highest number of funded startups in the fintech industry would be in the UAE with 30 funded startups, followed by South Africa and Nigeria. This is just one way of looking at it. We can flip it and look at it by country, for example. So if we want instead change that and look at it by country and look at the funded startups in each country, we can also do that. So I'm going to remove the primary industry filter, and I'm going to look at it by industry now, but I would want to take Saudi Arabia as an example of a country that we want to filter through. So as you can see, obviously the view is country now, but if I change it to primary industry, I'm able to see the Series A funded, Series A and pre-Series A funded startups in Saudi Arabia by industry. This is one way of looking at the data. Now, let's say we want to take a step further and we want to look at total funding across different countries. And we can actually do that through our geographical benchmarking tool. Going to this chart, we can see a couple of things. We can have a comparison, for example, from the current year to the previous year, or from 2022 to 2021. Maybe you want to analyze a pre and post-COVID. Look, these are all things that we can do. But just to give you the context of how this would work through the tool, we can go to the funding comparison and funding industry comparison as an example. So let's say I want to compare two countries in this regard. I want to compare the UAE and Saudi Arabia when it comes to startup funding across a certain set of industries. Here I have my top 5 industries in each respective countries. So I'm looking at food and beverage. And then we have fintech, transport and logistics, real estate and e-commerce in the UAE versus Saudi Arabia. And this is over the past 5 years. Let's say I only want to look at 2022, just for the sake of having a relevant comparison. So 2022, in 2022, we saw that, for example, Saudi led when it comes to transport and logistics. And on the other hand, we can see that the UAE led in other areas of the industries. Again, this can be expanded and they can be flipped. We can look at other countries as well. And we can even focus on what stage these are at. So let's say you want to only look at seed. This is also possible. There's a lot of ways in which we can actually look at this data. And this is why we constantly encourage our clients to use this tool, simply because there's a lot of ways in which you can analyze and look at this data. You have your different filters and different stages, different even round categories. We're talking about mega deals or no mega deals that are above $100 million. So there's a lot of ways in which we can look at this data. If we want to just compare funding in general or the number of deals in general, this can also be done. Now, if I want to have a geographical overview of the deals across the top 5 countries, for example, we can do that. Let's say I want to compare a different set of countries, I can also do that. So all of these are also available within our tool. I want to also go ahead and talk about industry benchmarking. So this is flipped. This is basically the same as the country. However, we are going ahead and we are going to look at it from the industry lens on the other hand. So let's say I want to see what fintech, for example, is doing between comparing them across different countries. Fintech and e-commerce across different countries. I'm an investor who is interested in seeing how these sectors are doing in terms of receiving funding in startup space across several countries. I can expand this list to more countries, but for example, in the top 10 countries, we can see in terms of fintech versus e-commerce where this is going. For example, we can see that the gap is really big between fintech and e-commerce in Nigeria. However, that gap is smaller in the UAE and even smaller in Egypt. And in Saudi Arabia, it's almost the same. So this can give us a bit more insight about how these markets are doing in this regard. I can zoom in on a particular year. I can go back all the way to when we start tracking this data. And there's different ways in which we can look at this. I want to also jump on the two more of the use cases. So this was basically benchmarking across industries and geographies. But let's say I want to also understand investor ranking across different industries and countries. And we're talking about investor ranking by number of investments, which we track, and estimated deployed capital, which is something that we also track. But however, this estimated deployed capital is informed by the estimated ticket sizes, which we estimate based on the round size, the verified round size, as well as the number of investors who participated in this and the investors' other investments. Again, this is where we also invite a lot of our investor clients, partners, and people who look at this data to see if, for example, their ticket sizes on certain investments are not correct because they are estimated. They are welcome to correct them. And then their estimated deployed capital will be reflected and updated in our advanced analytics tool. Again, as I mentioned, there is a process. Our data team does the outreach and they check and verify this information. So this is where we invite feedback from our clients and partners to go ahead and clarify this information. An example, I want to look at the investment environment in Egypt as an example. And I want to see in Egypt, who are the top investors by the number of investments, but let's say we want to look at only 2022, that being last year. So in Egypt, last year, we've seen in terms of number of investments, the top 10 investors, Flat 6 Labs, obviously they focus on early stage and with smaller ticket sizes. They have 22 investments in Egypt with an estimated deployed capital of 2 million. Following that, we have 500 Global with 13 investments. And this is what we've recorded and verified on our platform. But let's say I want to look at it from a different lens and actually, okay, what if they actually made, I don't know, they made 22 investments, but what are the size of these investments? This would be where we would go ahead and use our estimated deployed capital to rank these investors. So it would be, in this case, would be include with 15 million in terms of estimated capital deployed with 7 deals, followed by 4DX Ventures with 13 million. So this is where, obviously, this data is taken from, as I mentioned, the estimated ticket size of each investor and the rounds that he participated in Egyptian startups in 2022. Let's say you want to take it a step further. We want to zoom in on a particular industry in Egypt. I want to know who the top fintech and e-commerce together investors are in Egypt by estimated deployed capital in 2022. In this case, it will also be included, but when we zoomed in on e-commerce and fintech, we got to 14 million estimated deployed capital. The number of investments here was 6 instead of 7. So it means that most of their investments have been in fintech and e-commerce in Egypt. If we take away the industry filter and we zoom in on particular stage, I want to know who the top early stage investors are in Egypt. I can go to pre-seed, seed filtered here in the stage button, and then maybe add, let's say, I want to consider pre-series A and series A to be early stage. This is my definition, for example, and this is how I'm looking at that. I see that Disrupt Tech is the top by the number of, by their total estimated capital deployed in Egypt in these startups in 2022 in pre-seed, Series A, pre-series A, and seed investments with a total estimated deployed capital of 12 million. So there are different ways in which we can look at this data. There's another layer where we can compare the investors and their comparisons, and we can even look at the investors' different comparison. We can even look at the top investors in this case. However, we would like to tackle that in a future webinar. The last use case that I wanted to tackle is exits. Exits, as we noted in our 2023 EVM, Emerging Venture Markets report, that 2022 was the year of exits, and we do expect 2023 to continue that upwards trends in the number of exits. We saw a record number of exits in MENA, for example, in 2022. We expect that trend to continue based on our research and based on the trends that are happening. Obviously, we're not saying that these are good exits. Some exits may have been done due to the financial situation that is going around all over the globe. But so we thought it would be also prudent to also include an exits analysis on our platform. And so we can compare that across industries and countries. Now, this is just a trend of the exits that have been happening. As you can see in 2022, emerging venture markets saw 146 exits, which is a record number since when we started tracking this. Let's say you want to compare it by region. We can see that, for example, in this case, the Middle East had the highest number with 51 startups, followed by North Africa with 38. And you can see these going across and changing across the lines over here. One thing that we did want to also compare was industry. So how are exits doing in terms of industries? So we can see the top industries here that are going. So for example, fintech had 24 exits in 2022 across the emerging venture markets, followed by 22 for e-commerce and 14 for IT solutions, so on and so forth. If I want to zoom in a particular country, this is where I can select a filter, and let's look at Saudi startups only over the past 5 years. This is where this is possible as well. So we can see that last year we had 3 e-commerce exits, followed by 1 exit for EdTech and 1 exit for healthcare in Saudi Arabia. The last graph that we wanted to look at is understanding, for example, if I am an investor or I am someone who's interested in working with a startup or investing in a startup, I want to see that on average, let's say in Saudi Arabia, or we can choose any set of countries. Let's just go for the GCC in this case, Saudi, UAE, and Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar, as well as Kuwait, the 6 GCC countries. And I want to see what is the average year to exit of an e-commerce startup. So this will tell me, based on the data that we have, that the evolution of the e-commerce startups, average year median and mean year to exit over the past years where there were exits that we've recorded. From when the startup was founded to when it exited, we've been recording that, and this is how this graph was produced. So we can see that there's around 5 years, both mean and median in 2020. If we go to 2022, the mean is about 3.7 and the median is about 4.2. Obviously, this is influenced by the M&A activity that happened in the previous and in 2022. If we take away the industry filter and want to look at it through a wider lens, as an example, we can see it fluctuating throughout. And we can see that in 2022, the average year to exit in the GCC for a startup that's based in the GCC is 4.5 in terms of median, and in terms of mean, the average is 5.5 years. This is what we wanted to cover in this. So there's obviously a lot of charts in advanced analytics, but this is where we do invite you, our dear attendees, to ask questions. So we will be opening for a Q&A now. So if there are any questions, please let me know, and we will be tackling them. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can look at the questions. All right, I think we have our first question. First question being is, can we download this data? Can we download this underlying data? So to answer this question, is not specifically directly from the advanced analytics tool. This is feedback that we've received. I'm personally hoping it would be something that would be added. This all depends on what direction the development team on the platform wants to do, but I personally see it, I think would be a great idea. So the more feedback that we get, the better it is that it would be implemented. So what can be done is actually you can go and search with the same criteria in the funding rounds, so under the startups, and then looking for those funding rounds, and then exporting that information. So that is one way of actually going and downloading the data, although indirectly. Or for example, if you would like to export the underlying data, you can always reach out to your account manager, in this case, myself and Amir, and we'll be happy to help you with exporting the underlying data, obviously within your export quota. But again, I do agree it is a great feature to have. Do we have any more questions? Another question that we also get is, can we customize views or have, for example, different, let's say, different views that we can customize ourselves that are saved? Again, this is not something that's currently available on the platform. This is also another point of feedback for us in the direction that we want to develop this tool. So we are hoping that potentially the more feedback we get around this, the more we will actually consider adding this. And obviously this feedback is noted, and we get the idea of a user experience going in and being able to have your pre-saved charts and going to them instead of having to, for example, reload your filters every time. Happy to answer any other questions. I also got a question on undisclosed rounds here. So undisclosed rounds, this is when it comes to the, obviously there are rounds that are announced, but the amounts are undisclosed. we do record these in our reports. And yes, we have an undisclosed proxy calculation that we use to estimate that amount. So what you see, for example, when we, for example, talk about total funding in countries, this would include the undisclosed proxies that we've calculated and approximated. And it would include the undisclosed proxies based on our calculations. There is, if you would want to know the percentage or the differences, you can always reach out to us. We also make that apparent in some of our reports, I believe. Any more questions? Great, I believe that's it then. We would like to thank all the participants in this webinar. We are planning on hosting a few more soon on different topics, whether it's with advanced analytics or through other tools such as our, for example, market maps and startup directories. And we will be in touch soon. Again, if you have any feedback, you have any more questions, you can always reach out to me and Amir, and we'll be happy to help you and to also take you through the tool if you have any questions. We wish everyone a great day. And again, there will be also a recording of this webinar. We'll be sharing it with those who couldn't make it. Thanks again and have a great day. Bye-bye.